Hi everybody, my name's Thomas Quinn, and this is Undeniable. Hi everyone, how are you doing? Are you staying healthy? Are you staying sane? Here at Undeniable Pod, we are taking a break from our traditional interviews during the pandemic, but I've been working on recording an audiobook for my novel, The Happy End. I'm offering it up for free here, 5 chapters at a time. So if you haven't, please subscribe, please like, please rate. I hope you listen and enjoy, and would love to hear from you about any thoughts or comments. Stay safe, stay strong, stay committed. We're in this together. The Happy End by Thomas Quinn. Part 1. The Unpleasant Beginning. Chapter 11. Horace woke at first light, sober, unsure of the previous night. He tried the front desk, but there was no answer. Was it all a dream? He went to his computer to see how the world was handling his report and watched the young reporter's morning address. I'm here at the site of Ground Zero, where, as you can see behind me, construction is just about to begin on the first of the 19 antimatter projectors. It's quite a scene, she continued. We have Dr. Ahmed Yasevi in attendance, the mastermind behind the projectors. Horace watched with little interest, seeing his smiling friend staring back at him with a shovel in hand. A crowd of workers and dignitaries let out a cheer as he dug his shovel into the soil, signifying the beginning of construction. And for a split second, he was jealous. It passed. The reporter was back on screen. Horace lost himself in her beauty. She awoke sensations and desires long forgotten in him. But she was signing off for the day, leaving him just like everyone else. In the New World, there were no 24-hour news channels, rather 2 20-minute segments, one at the beginning and end of the day, available to the entire world on demand. Each segment was divided equally between global and local news. They were meant to inform but also lead in the transition process from the old world to new. The workday was the biggest change to the day-to-day life of the average citizen. No longer was someone expected to work 8, 10, 12, or in some cases 16 hours at a time. There was no need. Almost all agriculture and production of goods deemed necessities for life had been automated decades before. For this, the report outlined a 4-hour workday required 4 days a week from each citizen. With the new abundance of free time, citizens were encouraged to aid in the transition or to participate in one of the many goodwill activities as suggested by the report. These included, among many other things, attending courses in science, math, music and dancing workshops, painting and language classes, sporting matches, and a variety of other activities that were not only seen as a good way to boost morale, but also a proven health benefit. And though there was confusion in the transition process, being day 2 of the new world, the relief of being able to combat the threat from above kept spirits high. It was less than 4 months since Horace was fired and disgraced, and in this time he had shaped the entire world for the better, or so he claimed. And yet, what would happen next? He couldn't figure it out. Could the world live happily ever after? Could Ahmed handle the pressure? Could he, for that matter? With these thoughts, a whole new wave of variables confronted him. What if people began to ask questions? Real questions. What if they wanted to know just how the antimatter projectors worked? Then again, there's an answer for that. Even with his paranoia running wild, he soon believed that indeed he had covered all his bases. But if Horace had learned anything from his lifetime of science, he knew this: there will always be a degree of error. No matter how minuscule, no matter how concrete the laws of the universe appear, Chaos is life. The limousine pulled into the driveway, and he sat in the back on his way to meet with Ahmed, ready to unleash these thoughts onto him, hoping that if anyone could put his mind at ease, it would be him. But he soon realized that even these thoughts were chaos. There was no certainty. It didn't matter that human nature could predict how the masses would react. There would always be divergence. He knew this, but still, he needed certainty. But there was none. Part 2. The Forgotten Utopia. Chapter 12. 18 months passed. The world in all its glory still hung in the black soup of infinity. And though the threat of her demise echoed in the pessimists along for the ride, in most circles each day was considered one step closer to the greater goal of unity, where all those fortunate enough to be were. Horace slipped into a life of seclusion. There was no need to remain prominent in the affairs of Greek symbol. It had already succeeded in becoming autonomous in its permanence. So he returned to Chile, enjoying the tranquilo attitude of the people in differing environments available depending on the region. He no longer felt like the father of the new world. He was merely a man, and as the days turned to months, the realization that he was no longer a young man became clear. He lived in a quaint hut on the Pacific, 200 kilometers from Santiago, splitting his 4 hours of mandatory service each day by teaching the local kids science or by helping in the gardens, where there was always work to be done. He loved his time with the children, as it forced him from the webs of his mind. The children wouldn't allow for it. They seemed to survive through their questions, and no matter how quickly he could answer one, there was always another hand in the air waiting. His free time was spent by the ocean, often in deep states of meditation. He saw in each breaking crest the entirety of what his life has been. He existed. He knew this because of the way the sun beamed against his face, or the sand sifted through his fingers and toes. But something else was happening to Horace during this time alone. A new obsession was growing. If he existed, if this universe was real, then so did the anti-Horace. He began to think about the anti-pairs of the people he met, but not only the people, also the objects he encountered, realizing that in reality, they both existed and they didn't. His ponderings led him into a newfound spirituality, or so he described in his writings, still unable to express these thoughts to any living being. Rather, he often found himself discussing them with his anti-self. If birth defines life against death, he thought, mustn't the opposite be true of the anti-self? Is this the spirit trapped inside us all? Increasingly, it was only while asleep that Horace felt alive. Here, his meditations took on a new form. He began searching the net for books on lucid dreaming and the teachings of shamans who had accessed realms of existence beyond the natural world. He started practicing their techniques, still seeking reunion. He no longer touched alcohol, though enjoyed smoking hashish, blurring the boundaries of his consciousness. It eased his mind as there was no ego, no id, no self, fingers, or heartbeats. Everything was only a projection of his anti-self, or so he wrote. Ahmed was the only one who was allowed insight into these thoughts. Horace filled his letters with them. He described in great detail new theories of parallel universes and anti-universes, delving further into his newfound spirituality and what it truly meant to die, describing it as the great moment when the anti-self and the self collide. He never awaited a reply from his friend, and if he received one, never opened it.
rather used it as kindling for his fire, which doubled as his furnace and stove. He knew there was no answers to be had. His answers were found in the songs of birds, the crackling of burning wood, the pounding of the surf, and the sprouting of seeds. Everything that at one point he would have needed to define in molecular terms, but now defined as God's truth, even if he still believed he was responsible for killing God. His life was simple. There were no tragedies anymore, at least not like there used to be. People still died, earthquakes still shook the ground, and floods still washed the slopes clean. But nothing to compel that same type of fear, that same longing and gratitude for a continued life. Everyone was living. If they weren't, they were dead. In the end, 18 months passed. Chapter 13. For the first time in his life, Horace Newsom was completely free. He answered to no one but himself. Some days he woke when still dark and sat by the ocean as the moon drifted away. Other days he would catch a ride with the transport convoy and drive into Santiago and watch as the restoration crews dismantled the old capital. He never knew why these urges manifested, but had learned not to fight them. His meditation practice had heightened his awareness to new unexplored forces, and quickly learned to trust the feelings they invoked in him. Horace was not alone in his desire to deviate from routine. Heads were reporting news of these attacks of spontaneity from around the world. It seemed the freedom granted by the New World had not brought the stability they might have hoped. Stories emerged of people going to work as they had every other day for the past year and a half, but then instead of breaking for lunch or during their shift change, strange occurrences began to occur. Men stripped their clothes and tried to mate with whoever they were with, man, woman, or in some cases beast. It didn't matter. Others would seemingly forget that they were constrained by the laws of gravity and step from the floor of the antimatter projector they were working on, plummeting to their death. Beyond the heads in charge and direct witnesses, there was no other record of these events. There was no bad news allowed over the net. It was forbidden in the restricted pages of the report. But the frequency of these types of acts caused alarm amongst the heads of Greek symbol. Horace, without a phone, and never having read any of the emails or letters sent to him by Ahmed, knew only of the acts he had witnessed. This led to his surprise one day, when he returned from the gardens to find Ahmed the Savior sitting on his cot, stoking a fire kindled by his unopened letters. "You're a hard man to get a hold of." Ahmed stood and embraced Horace as if a long-lost friend. And by all definitions, this is what they were. "I suppose this explains why you have yet to address any of my concerns." Ahmed jabbed at the ash of one of his letters. "I have no need for answers." He seemed wary of how to proceed. The effects of Horace's isolation made him cautious. "Something is happening." "You're telling me." Horace took the pot from the flame and poured 2 cups of tea, before taking his pipe and lighting it with a branch from the fire. "People are beginning to talk. They don't know how to react. Every day there is a new story." Ahmed sipped from his mug, smiling to signify his enjoyment. "Did you hear the one of the man who chopped off his penis?" Both men instinctively covered their groins with their free hands. "The other heads don't know how to react. I would suggest not following that man's lead," answered Horace coyly. Ahmed seemed uncomfortable in the hut and pushed through the door after refusing a smoke from Horace's pipe. They walked to the edge of the surf, listening in silence for a few minutes. But Ahmed couldn't stand still. He was waiting for Horace to resume his role as leader. "So," posed Ahmed at last, "Francisco the other day asked me why he couldn't see the rogue planet through his telescope." Ahmed knew of Francisco. Horace had written a great deal about his pupil. though most of his rambles were concerned with the anti-Francisco. I told him that it was still too far away. I think it's good that you're teaching. Again, silence bound them. Ahmed picked up a few flat stones and began skipping them into the waves, but only managed 1 or 2 quick jumps before being engulfed in the tumbling whitewash. Maybe this was a mistake, he contemplated aloud, his hand free of the last stone. What, coming here, or playing God? In a world of atheists, someone had to. Ahmed smiled at his friend, trying to get some recollection out of him. It was, after all, one of Horace's quotes. I suppose so. Horace stripped naked and began to wade into the ocean, not listening to Ahmed, who was still talking but was unable to impact Horace's thoughts. When he returned, Ahmed was still on the beach, sitting on an overturned palm tree, staring off into the distance, deep in thought. Ha! There he is, the anti-god. Horace's laughter shook Ahmed but seemed not to puncture his thoughts as he wished. Do you know why I chose you as the leader? He posed, with returned life to his voice, displaying a slight semblance of his old self. Because I knew you would do what you were asked. Your pawn, is that it? Exactly. Horace's honesty was too much for him to bear. What is it? What the hell have we done? People are killing themselves. They're killing each other. Why aren't they happy? Are you happy? I don't know anymore. What does Nancy think? Oh, who gives a shit what she thinks? She loves it. She thinks we're royalty. She feels like Jackie O. Let's hope she doesn't get her wish. They fell silent again. What should I tell the others? Ahmed was still looking out at the ocean for answers. Whatever you want. They want to talk to you, but I don't know if that's a good idea. Me neither. I don't think I can keep it up. What do you mean? It's not like we can go back now. It's a little late for second guessing. Jesus, man, he cut off his dick. Horace turned from the fading sun and for a minute lost himself in his friend, revisited by their years together. He could see everything that had led them to this moment, and everything that would take them to their ultimate ending. He could see the entire course, but there was something else he could see. He could see the anti-truth. Death is as natural as life, and insanity is as normal as sanity. Horace chuckled, as if to prove his point. It's just when you think you have life figured out that it shows you there is nothing to control. He lit his pipe again, offering it to Ahmed, who received it with grateful lungs. In short, who cares? What? Ahmed's shock expelled the smoke before he could fully inhale. So what? He cut off his prick. People jumped to their deaths. Blah, blah, blah. What makes life so sublime that we feel the need to hold on to it with such filthy hands that we can't fathom why someone else might not want it? But it's us. We created this. Yes, we did. Horace jumped to his feet with his arms raised in a V towards the awakening heavens. We're the anti-gods. Chapter 14. Ahmed returned to his position as leader of the New World, assured of how to placate the other heads, who in turn would appease their subordinates, and on it would go until reported to the world during a morning news segment. But it wouldn't stop the deaths. There was no war, but it didn't mean one couldn't begin. Every human had food if they wished to eat it, just as they had shelter, employment, and free access to medicine. But the desire to live was theirs. Even the anti-gods had to give up free will. So off Ahmed went, leaving Horace for another day of work and another night alone. He woke the following morning to the shock of sharing his room with a man of Eastern European descent. A deaf mute, it appeared, for Horace's startled cry didn't stir him or cause him to explain why he had been sitting in the corner of his hut watching him sleep. My word, a true communist! What's mine is yours, comrade! Sarcasm was Horace's best defense. His words washed over the intruder, who simply stirred and left the hut, not motioning for Horace to pursue, but the presumption was enough for him to dress in his soiled gardening clothes and follow him out quickly.
Once outside, the sun's beam struck his irises, causing his pupils to dilate, leaving him unaware of the log in the hand of the unseen man. Suddenly there was a thud against the back of his skull, and darkness swept in. The sound of jet engines stirred Horace. He opened his eyes to see his assailant beside him, and upon discovering Horace conscious, opened a small leather case, removing a needle, and injected him with the sedative. Horace's last thought before relenting to the bliss of nothingness once more was wondering why he hadn't used the drug the first time, instead of smacking him aback the skull. The next time Horace woke, he was lying on a sofa in an extravagantly decorated parlor room. His face and shirt were wet from the water thrown onto him. "She wants to see you," informed Horace's kidnapper. "The beast speaks." Horace was still groggy from his 9-hour trip into nothingness. "You know, you could have at least asked me if I wanted to go with you." "She wants to see you," repeated the heavily accented man who was obviously some hired gun, not getting paid for civility. Horace had thoughts of resisting, but figured anyone would be better than the beast of a man in front of him. "Very well, Boris, lead the way. That is, unless you want to give me another whack on the head and throw me over your shoulder like the mongoloid fuck you are." The man seemed indifferent, and approached Horace with the slightest gleam of a smile hidden under his scarred and mischievous face. They traveled down a long hallway of closed doors, decorated with paintings depicting what Horace thought to be 15th century warlords. Chandeliers lined the ceiling and mirrors reflecting the light over top of antique tables supporting Ming vases and orbs. When they reached the double doors at the end of the hall, the man knocked twice before turning the crystal doorknob and motioning for Horace to enter. Inside there was the distinct smell of a wood fire burning, and for a moment Horace was flooded by memory. He was 5, watching his father chop wood in the snow. This memory was particularly lucid. It was his father's last winter. He could see the way the axe cut through the wood in one smooth stroke. It looked effortless. He was a personification of a man, strong, handy, and good-natured, showing no signs of the disease that would cut his life short. The sound of the door closing emphasized his seclusion, lost in the flickering dance of the flame. Indifferent, and yet at peace. There was another person in the room, a female, this he knew, but he had yet to see her, nor did he feel the need to find her. Where was he, anyways? Had he not been assaulted and brought against his will? For all he knew, he could be on the other side of the world. Suddenly, his present situation induced a fit of rage. He wanted to find this woman so he could let her know just how he felt. But before his thoughts turned into actions, the sound of a delicate cough turned him to the far corner of the room. A young girl, who looked all of 15, sat staring out the window, watching the snowflakes fall. "Please, won't you have a seat, Dr. Newsom?" Horace was stunned. She couldn't be the woman he was meant to see. She couldn't be in command of the scarred beast. There was something else that kept his feet in place, her eloquence. She wore a silk nightcoat pulled tight at the neck, with a mauve scarf tied around her raven-black hair. "Please, I insist." Her manner, though gentle, held true to someone in a position of power. "We do have much to discuss." Horace sat in the armchair beside her, but was still unable to speak. His mind became wild with scenarios, left trying to figure out who she was, and more so what possible use she might have for him. "I brought you here, Dr. Newsom, because you are the only one who can help stop the world's collapse." She spoke with locked eyes, as if proving to him that she was reading his thoughts. I know. You're just a teacher now, or do you prefer a gardener?" "Teacher's fine." "Very good. Tea?" She poured him a cup without waiting for a reply. "Do you know China was built on this tea, Dr. Newsom? They've since found ways to make it artificially, more economical and all that, but nothing can compare to the real thing. I can almost live off of it. Any time of the day, it doesn't matter. It's always tea time." She smiled with a slight giggle, leveling Horace's guard. "Good," he agreed, after sipping from his steaming mug, left captivated by her. "What did you mean when you said world collapse?" "Ha, very good." Once mentioning it, Horace realized how ridiculous his question was. Well, let's just say there will be no time left for tea." She finished her mug, exhaling with exultation, sitting back for a moment to take in the view from her window once more. "This must be quite a shock coming from Chile, but I'm sorry, I'm not able to travel much these days." "Why's that?" "Oh, I'm afraid it's a matter of security. Can never be too careful. I trust Stephen wasn't too overbearing getting you here." The model of civility. "Ha, of course. How's the head? I do apologize. Stephen's loyalty spans for 19 generations. He takes his duties very seriously." "I'd say." Horace for the first time sent a hand behind his head to examine the goose egg that was still raw to the touch. He chose to ignore it for another sip of tea, which was truly the most magnificent flavor he had ever experienced. "I was going to ask more about you, such as how you've coped with the loss of Samantha, and the civilities one is supposed to discuss during a first meeting, but I presume you must be waiting for me to get to the point. Well, Dr. Newsom, here it is. My name is Emily. I am the sole survivor of my family's bloodline, a bloodline that has spanned from the beginning of civilization, one marred with the responsibility of maintaining balance in this world of chaos." "Chaos?" "Oh, yes. There's nothing more chaotic than a man inhibited by greed." "Greed?" "Yes, Horace. I can call you Horace, can't I?" He nodded in acceptance. "For as long as humans have been able to organize themselves, there have been two sides. Some might like to call them good versus evil, or love versus fear. Or, I suppose, those are the two that best qualify. However, at its core, it's nothing more than a rift between two clans." "Clans?" Horace wished he had something more significant to add than simply emphasizing the last word spoken. But this continued to occur by reflex, and he was at a loss as to what role he was to play in this new relationship. "Yes, I can't be sure how they reintroduced themselves, but what is certain is that they were seeking control of your latest project, these antimatter projectors." "They said it was about power. I figured they were just looking for money." "What good is money in the new world, Horace? They want to destroy you, me, and everything else that stands in their way." "To what?" "Domination. It's the most natural urge. What else is power or money but a way to dominate over others?" "But who are they? And more so, who are you?" Horace was growing tired of this dance. He had no use for stories. He wanted to know why he was watching snowflakes instead of listening to the ocean's melody. He wanted to know why his head still hurt with lasting impressions of Stephen's brutish hand, and most importantly, he wanted to know why he should care what this little girl had to say. Of course it was a quest for dominance. Was this supposed to be some new revelation? What other reason did man have to live? Sensing Horace's agitation, Emily reached out her hand, touching his. "Please, I ask you only to listen. I know this must be hard for you, and I know there is little interest in it for you, but if they have what they want, they will not only destroy me, but they will destroy this beautiful new world you have created." Horace scoffed at the mention of beautiful. What of the man with no penis, or the cannibals, or those who thought it the best option to jump from the 35th story? Where was the beauty in their lives? "I didn't create anything. Please, we've known from day one what you were capable. That's why we were funding your research." "What?" "Horace, we've been helping you since you graduated from Oxford. In fact, my family has been watching your progress since your 3rd grade science fair." "Why?" He stood from his chair and turned away from Emily, walking towards the fireplace as if to warm from the fire. "Can I ask you something, Horace?" Horace threw a log into the fire before he turned to her. "Why didn't you take the job in research and development?" "What?" Horace knew exactly of what she spoke. It was a contract that was offered to him fresh from his doctorate. The Department of Defense had offered him an 8-figure salary, but he denied it to pursue his own research. "Love, isn't that it? Wasn't that what you saw? You could have chosen money. You could have taken the easy route, just as you could forget what it is I'm telling you now, and return to your life on the beach and simply fade away with time. But you didn't. You thought your life had more to offer. You thought you could do good in your time here." "How old are you?" Horace had to suppress his anger. He was on the verge of shouting, dismissing this girl. What did she know? Sure, her facts were right, but her presumptuous attitude was getting to him. How dare you tell me what I did and why I did it? You don't know anything about me. I don't have to sit here and be lectured by some adolescent. Love. Wasn't that why, Dr. Newsom? Emily gently rang a miniature bell that was sitting on the table beside her mug, and the door of the study opened instantly. Stephen, please take Dr. Newsom, home. She turned back to Horace. When you see me, you see an innocent girl, but appearances can be deceiving, Dr. Newsom, just as your notion of time. Pie? Questioned Horace in a muted voice as he paused in the doorway. I'm afraid, Dr. Newsom, for once, I have no idea what you are talking about. They shared a moment. Please just consider it. She turned back to the window, and Horace showed himself out, met by the prick of the syringe in sweet darkness.
Chapter 15. The waves were furious with the arrival of a new swell. Horace stared at the tumultuous surf, wondering what storm in what part of the world was to blame. Had it taken the lives of any? How many? Perhaps 1, 2, maybe 1,000 had perished from the platform of one of the offshore antimatter projectors. Did it matter? His encounter with Emily was still too fresh in mind to allow any conclusive thoughts. Rather, he was running wild with questions. Was she right when she read through his history as if one of the books from her studies shelf? Why did he refuse the money? Was it love? How else could it be described? Turning down an offer because of an arrogant notion of being meant for greatness. No justification could enable him to work for the war machine. No freedom needed to be secured. No amount of money could make him forget the images of the wars of his lifetime. Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Syria, France, Greece, Darfur, Iran, Pakistan, Korea. Millions perished around the globe because good people like him were lured by the luxury of a lucrative career under the guise of protecting a word, freedom. But was it love? The tide reached his feet. Horace showed no signs of moving. It had been 20 feet out when he first sat down, and it was still rising. People were still dying. They were falling ill. They were killing themselves. They were killing their brothers and sisters, and their sons and daughters, and their fathers and mothers. This had not ceased in the New World. Bombs were no longer falling, but in the chaos after the announcement of the rogue planet, thousands were killed in riots. Somehow, to Horace, these deaths were forgotten as justified. But was this also for love? He had no answer. His entire perception of what his life had been and where it was going was lost. The cool water bathed his feet, and he wished for the tide to take him away, but it had peaked. The watermark ended just beyond him and had already begun its retreat. And yet there he sat as a fixture in the sand, a rock, a lump of clay, an empty shell left behind, as if his spirit had grown too large, or in this case too small, and was off in search of a new vessel. He felt unworthy of life, and in a moment of weakness thought of ending it all, again thinking only of Samantha, revisited by his ponderings of the anti-life and of reunion. The cry of seabirds woke him at dawn. He had fallen asleep with his face in the sand, and couldn't rid the taste from his mouth. He felt dirty, tired, and had hundreds of bites from sand fleas up and down his body. But before he could reach his hut, there stood the elderly man from the limo, blocking the entrance with 2 of Horace's coffee mugs in hand. "I'm not in the mood," announced Horace definitively. "No, of course not. You've had a busy last couple of days." He handed Horace the coffee and then followed him inside where the fire was burning low. "But we do have some concerns, and so here I am. Fuck your concerns." Now,
There's no need for such language. He sat in the same chair Stephen used while watching him sleep. We just feel that you have heard only one side of the story, and now, out of sheer objectivity, you ought to hear the other. Horace spread out on his cot, burying his head in his pillow, but the sensation of the man in his personal space was too much to be ignored, and after a minute, which felt like an eternity of trying to sleep, he sprung up to a sitting position, realizing that men like this were used to getting their way, and thus it would be easier to hear him out and be rid of him. I trust you don't want to drug me first, or perhaps hit me over the head and drag me out to the site of the Holocaust or something? Oh my, no. You'll have to excuse us for last time. Mere words don't affect some people. They have to experience something. What, radiation poisoning? We were merely showing you that no matter what intentions one might have, there are always consequences to their actions, even if accidental. In some cases, if not most cases, they're quite grave indeed. So what is this, then? This is when we see if you are ready. Who the hell is we? Why does everyone always have to speak in riddles? I do believe I've already mentioned my fellow colleagues. So are you a family as well? Or a clan? What, just a bunch of rich aristocrats? What is it? Just tell me what it is you want from me, and then leave me to sleep. We want to make sure you don't believe everything you're told. Stephen and his men are liars, and they will use anything in their power to manipulate you against us. But who are you? Horace felt an urge to attack this man. He clenched his fist, thinking that if he wasn't given the answers he deserved, he would force them out of him. I represent a foundation older than time itself. And Horace, we would like you to join us. Join you? Horace was hysterical. Why would I want to do that? Because we have the answers you seek. The man seemed to take on an entirely new form. The physical laws weakened in his presence. He was certainly in complete control, despite what Horace wanted to believe. Horace, our organization protects the secrets of time. We protect not only life as you know it, but the meaning of why we are here. The man's stare was mischievous, but appeared sincere. Haven't you ever wondered why Earth was chosen to be the way it is? If you join us, we can tell you. Pie? What? The man became flustered. I've just offered you the secrets to the universe and you want to know if there's pie? His agitation seemed to add validity to what was just said. And if I refuse? You will remain here. You will die here. You will have no answers, and when the time comes, realize your life on Earth was useless. What of the new world? The new world is already crumbling. Even you can see that. It won't remember you. No one will. You'll be nothing more than a pin drop in the soup of it all. But will you leave me alone? As you wish, but I do so only because I know you will come around. You will have to. Your mind won't let you turn down the opportunity to know these truths. I humbly decline. Horace stood and with an extended arm pointed towards the door of his hut. Now if you don't mind, I'd like to get some fucking sleep. So there it is, guys. Thanks again for listening. Please subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to this. It really helps me keep going, seeing the numbers gradually climb. Any like, any share, any review really helps us out in the algorithm. And as we all know, the algorithms rule our life. So let's take the power back, give us a little bump. And if you're looking to get in contact with me, you can reach me at undeniablepod@gmail.com. If you're looking to get on, if you have some suggestions, or if any personal insight on the struggle that you guys face as artists, I'd love to hear from you. I might even pick a couple to read on the next pod. So thanks again. I'll talk to you again next week. Undeniable is a creation from Tomcast Industries. Theme music was created by Tony Malik.